The hall was packed. Every seat inside Prestige International Academy's grand graduation hall in Lagos was taken. Mothers in their finest. Fathers standing tall. The kind of crowd that makes even the air feel important. Lara had arrived early. She wore no heavy jewelry. No loud colors. Just a simple cream dress that fit her quietly, the way everything about her was quiet. She carried a small clutch bag and found her seat, front row, center, the one her daughter Zara had personally reserved for her. She sat down and exhaled slowly. 18 years had led to this morning. Then the side door opened. Toby walked in like the room belonged to him. Press suit. Shining shoes. And beside him, holding his arm with painted nails and a wide smile, was Sandra. She wore a fitted red dress and moved like someone who had practiced confidence her whole life. Lara watched them without moving a muscle. Toby spotted her. He walked straight over, leaned slightly forward, and dropped his voice low. Lara. Sandra needs that seat. Please move to the back. Behind him, Mama Toby stood with folded arms and cold eyes, watching with the kind of satisfaction that people should be ashamed to feel. Lara looked at him. Then at Sandra. Then she stood up, picked up her clutch, walked to the back row, and sat down without one single word. People whispered. Someone stared. A woman nearby pressed her hand to her chest. But Lara just looked at the stage, calm, still, and carrying a smile nobody could quite explain. Because in a few minutes, the principal of Prestige International Academy would stand at that podium and call a name. One name. A donor. The person behind the Academy's brand new performing arts building. And that name was going to change everything in that room. What was that name, and why had Lara been at peace all morning long? Nobody paid attention to the woman in the back row. That was the thing about being overlooked for so long. People stop seeing you. You become part of the background like a chair or a curtain. And Lara had learned, over 18 years, that being invisible had its advantages. She watched from the back as Toby settled into her old seat. He said something to Sandra and she laughed, touching his arm. Mama Toby sat on his other side, straight-backed and pleased with herself, scanning the room like a woman who had just won a competition nobody else knew they were playing. Lara shifted her eyes to the stage. She thought about the first year of their marriage. How young she had been. How full of hope. Toby had been charming back then, the kind of man who made you feel like the most important person in every room. He remembered her favorite foods. He called just to hear her voice. He told her she was the smartest woman he had ever met. She had believed him. For the first few years the marriage was good. Then slowly, quietly, like water finding cracks in a wall, things began to change. Toby got comfortable. He stopped noticing her. He started coming home late without explanation and leaving early without goodbye. He talked at her instead of to her. He made decisions without asking and signed her name on things without telling her. And when she tried to speak, he waved her off like she was a child asking about something too complicated for her to understand. She remembered the night she sat alone in their kitchen in their house in Lekki, long after Zara had gone to sleep, and she made a decision. Not an angry decision. Not a bitter one. Just a clear, cold, quiet decision. She was going to build something. Not to show him. Not to hurt him. Just because she had a mind that had been sitting still for too long, and she was tired of wasting it. She had a small savings account that Toby did not know about. She had been careful with it for years, putting money aside from the household budget, from small consulting work she did quietly on the side. It was not much, but it was enough to start. She registered Halcyon Capital Group from a small office in Victoria Island. She told nobody. She worked after Zara went to bed and before the house woke up. She took calls in her car. She read financial reports on her phone in the bathroom. She made connections, built relationships, and moved with the patience of someone who understood that real things take real time. Toby never asked about her days. So she never had to lie. Year after year, Halcyon Capital grew. Quietly. Steadily. The way big things grow when nobody is watching. Without noise, without celebration, without anyone to tell you well done. By the time Zara was in secondary school, Lara was already sitting across boardroom tables from men twice her age and winning. The woman they ignored at home was becoming someone the business world was beginning to fear. But Toby never knew. He was too busy not looking. The ceremony was about to begin. The lights in the hall dimmed slightly and the crowd settled. Lara straightened in her seat and fixed her eyes on the stage. Somewhere in the front row, Toby leaned over and whispered something in Sandra's ear. He had no idea what was coming. The principal walked to the podium. He was a tall man with silver hair and round glasses that sat low on his nose. He adjusted the microphone, looked out at the crowd, and smiled the way people smile when they are about to say something that matters. The hall went completely quiet. Today, he began, is not just a graduation. Today is a celebration of everything this institution stands for. Excellence, discipline, vision. Parents nodded. Some clapped softly. Toby crossed one leg over the other and checked his watch. But before we bring out our graduating class, the principal continued, there is something I must address. Something that has been kept secret for 2 years. Something that changed the future of this school forever. The room shifted. People sat up straighter. Even Toby lifted his eyes from his watch. 2 years ago, the principal said, a donor walked into my office. No camidas. No announcement. No conditions except one, that their identity remain private until today. This person wrote a single check that funded the entire construction of our performing arts building. The building you are sitting in right now. A soft murmur moved through the crowd. Lara sat still in the back row. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her breathing was slow and even. She had known this moment was coming for 2 years. She had planned for it, thought about it, and then set it aside and gone back to work. Because that was what she did. She worked. She did not wait for moments, she built them. The amount donated, the principal said, pausing to let the silence do its work, was 500 million naira. The murmur became a gasp. Mama Toby's head turned sharply toward the stage. Sandra straightened in her seat. Toby uncrossed his legs and leaned forward slightly, the way a man does when something has caught his full attention for the first time. And the company behind this donation, the principal continued, removing a small card from his breast pocket, is Halcyon Capital Group, a private equity and development firm founded right here in Lagos. He looked up from the card. A firm currently valued at over $32 billion. The gasp became something louder. Heads turned. People began looking around the room as if the donor might be standing somewhere obvious, wearing something that announced them. It is my honor, the principal said, his voice lifting now, to ask our donor to please stand. The woman who gave this school its greatest gift. The woman who asked for nothing in return except that her daughter graduate inside the building she built for her. He looked directly to the back of the hall. Mrs. Lara Coker. Please stand. Every head in that auditorium turned at the same time. And there she was. The woman in the simple cream dress. The woman who had been moved from the front row that same morning. The woman who had walked to the back without a single word and sat down like it meant nothing. She stood up slowly. Straight-backed. Chin level. Eyes clear. The hall erupted. Toby's face went completely still. Not shocked, something deeper than shocked. The look of a man watching the ground shift beneath his feet and realizing he had no idea how long it had been moving. Mama Toby said nothing. For the first time in 18 years she had absolutely nothing to say. Aunt Sandra, in her red dress in Lara's seat, felt something cold move through her chest, because the woman standing in the back row was not what any of them had thought she was. Not even close. The applause did not stop. It rolled through the hall like a wave that kept building instead of breaking. People who did not even know Lara were on their feet. Teachers clapped from the sides of the stage. Parents turned to each other with wide eyes and open mouths. Lara stood in the back row and let it wash over her. She did not raise her hands. Did not bow. Did not look toward the front row where Toby sat frozen in his seat. She simply stood the way she had always stood, quietly, fully, without needing anyone to hand her the moment. The principal gestured for her to come forward. She walked down the aisle slowly. People moved aside. Some reached out and touched her arm as she passed. An older woman near the middle rows was crying softly and did not seem to know why. A man in a brown agbada nodded at her the way people nod at someone they suddenly deeply respect. She passed the front row without looking at it. She climbed the 3 short steps to the stage and stood at the podium. The microphone was slightly too tall. She adjusted it herself without waiting for help, and the small action somehow made the crowd love her more. She looked out at the hall. Hundreds of faces looked back at her. And somewhere in that crowd, her daughter Zara was sitting with her graduating class, still in her gown, watching her mother stand at the podium of the building that had her mother's money in every wall. Lara took one breath and spoke. I did not build Halcyon Capital to impress anyone, she said. Her voice was steady and warm and carried the kind of weight that comes from actually living what you are saying. I built it because I had something inside me that refused to stay quiet. Even when everything around me told me to sit down and be small. The hall was completely silent. I funded this building for one reason. She paused. So that my daughter would spend her last years in this school walking through a door that her mother built. Not because I wanted her to be proud of me. Another pause. But because I wanted her to know, without anyone having to tell her, What a woman looks like when she refuses to stop. Someone in the crowd shouted something that sounded like a praise name. Laughter broke through the emotion and then the applause came again, harder this time. Lara stepped back from the microphone. She walked off the stage the same way she had walked on. Calm. Unhurried. Like a woman who had been ready for this for a very long time. But as she returned to her seat in the back row, she had not gone back to the front, had not asked for her seat, had not needed to. Something was happening in the front row that nobody on stage could see. Toby had not clapped once. He sat with his hands on his knees and his jaw tight. Beside him, Sandra was very still, her red dress suddenly looking less like confidence and more like a costume. Mama Toby had her eyes fixed on the floor, the satisfied smile from earlier completely gone, replaced by something she was working very hard to hide. Toby's mind was moving fast. He was a businessman. He understood numbers. $32 billion was not a small firm. It was not a side business. It was not something a woman builds in a spare afternoon. 15 years. His wife had been running a $32 billion company for 15 years and he had never once asked her what she did with her days. He turned his head slowly toward the back of the hall. Lara was already seated. Hands folded. Eyes on the stage. Waiting for her daughter to walk across that same stage and collect a certificate inside a building that told the whole story without saying another word. Toby opened his mouth. Then closed it. What exactly do you say to a woman you never bothered to see? Zara walked across that stage like she owned it. She was tall like her mother, with the same steady eyes and the same way of moving that made people pay attention without knowing why. When the principal called her name, the crowd clapped warmly. But when Zara reached the center of the stage, she stopped, turned, and looked directly to the back of the hall. She found her mother immediately. She pressed one hand to her chest and held it there for 3 seconds. A small, private gesture. The kind that carries 18 years inside it. Lara pressed her hand to her own chest and held it back. The crowd saw it and something tender moved through the room. A few people looked away because it felt too personal to watch. Others could not look away for exactly the same reason. Toby saw it too. He watched his daughter look past the front row, past him, past Sandra, past Mama Toby, and find her mother sitting alone in the back. And the look on Zara's face was not complicated. It was not divided or confused or trying to please anyone. It was clear. That was the moment Toby felt it fully. Not guilt exactly. Something heavier. The slow, sinking understanding that while he had been busy building an image, his wife had been building an empire. And while he had been deciding who deserved which seat, his daughter had already decided who she stood for. He had lost things he did not even know he was losing. The ceremony ended an hour later. Families poured into the courtyard outside. There were flowers and photographs and the kind of noise that only happens when joy has been held in too long. Zara ran to her mother first. She wrapped both arms around Lara and held on the way children hold on when they are not children anymore but still need to sometimes. Lara held her daughter and closed her eyes. "You saw me," Zara whispered. "I always saw you," Lara whispered back. They stayed like that for a long moment while the world moved around them. Then Toby appeared. He came alone. Sandra was somewhere behind him, standing near the car park with her arms folded and her eyes on her phone. Mama Toby had already called her driver. The morning had not gone the way either of them expected and neither of them had the energy to pretend otherwise. Toby stopped a few feet from Lara. Zara pulled back from her mother, looked at her father, and stepped to her mother's side. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Just clearly. The way you stand beside someone when you have already made your choice and you are simply showing it. Toby looked at his wife. Up close, in the afternoon light, he noticed things he had stopped noticing a long time ago. The calm in her face. The way she stood without leaning on anything. The complete absence of bitterness in her eyes, which somehow made everything worse. Lara. His voice came out smaller than he intended. She looked at him and waited. He opened his mouth to say something. An explanation, a question, something that would make the ground feel less unsteady beneath him. But nothing he could think of was big enough for the moment. Nothing he had prepared for in his whole life had prepared him for standing in front of a woman he had spent years shrinking, and realizing she had never once become small. "I did not know," he finally said. Lara looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "I know you didn't," she said simply. And somehow, those 4 words hurt more than anything else she could have said, because they were not angry. They were just true. She turned back to Zara, touched her daughter's face gently, and said something that made Zara smile. Then she began walking toward the car park without looking back. Toby stood exactly where she had left him. And for the first time in 18 years he was the one watching her walk away. 3 weeks passed. Lagos moved the way Lagos always moves, loud, fast, and completely unbothered by anyone's personal heartbreak. Traffic still choked the bridge every morning. Generators hummed through the night. Life continued the way life does, whether you are ready or not. But inside the walls of the house in Lekki, things had gone very quiet. Toby sat at the dining table one Thursday evening and looked around at a home that suddenly felt like a building he was just borrowing. Sandra had stopped returning his calls 4 days after the graduation. No explicación. No argument. Just silence and then a message that said she needed space and then nothing at all. He had known, somewhere underneath everything, that it would end this way. But knowing a thing and living it are two very different experiences. Mama Toby had gone back to Ibadan the week after the ceremony. She had not said much before leaving. Just packed her bag, hugged her son briefly at the door, and told him to sort himself out. It was the kindest and most honest thing she had said to him in years. Toby's phone rang less these days. 3 business deals he had been nursing for months had quietly fallen apart. Calls he expected were not returned. A contract he thought was guaranteed had gone to another firm without explanation. He had not connected the dots immediately, but when he finally sat down and traced the threads, they all led back to the same place. Halcyon Capital Group. Not directly. Lara had not made a single move against him. She had not called anyone or withdrawn anything or sent a single message designed to hurt him. But networks are built on relationships, and relationships follow respect. And the people who had been quietly connected to Lara's world had simply, naturally, moved their business elsewhere once the full picture became clear. He had not been attacked. He had just been left behind. Lara, by that same Thursday evening, was sitting in the living room of a house in Ikoyi. It was a beautiful house. 4 bedrooms, high ceilings, wide windows that let the evening light pour in like it had been invited. She had purchased it quietly 3 years earlier, paying cash through a holding company, and had furnished it slowly over time, piece by piece, the way she did everything. A chair here. A painting there. A kitchen that was hers alone. Zara was upstairs. She had moved in the week after graduation without drama or long speeches. She had simply packed a bag, kissed her father on the cheek, and told him she loved him. Then she had asked the driver to take her to her mother's address in Ikoyi, an address Toby had not known existed. That evening, Zara came downstairs in a loose shirt and socks and dropped onto the sofa beside her mother. They watched television together without talking much. Lara made tea. Zara stole most of it. Outside, the Ikoyi streets were calm and the generator ran smoothly and the house felt like exactly what it was. A place a woman had built for herself and her daughter long before anyone else knew they would need it. Lara thought about Toby sometimes. Not with anger. Not with longing either. Just with the mild, clear-eyed feeling of someone looking back at a road they had already walked and understanding it fully now that they were no longer on it. She had not wasted her pain. She had composted it, turned it into focus, into discipline, into every early morning and late night that had built Halcyon Capital from a small office in Victoria Island into something the whole country now knew. She had never set out to prove anything to him. That was the part people found hardest to believe when the story spread, and it did spread the way remarkable things always do in Lagos. People assumed she had planned the graduation reveal as revenge. But revenge requires the other person to still have power over you. And Toby had lost that power so gradually, over so many quiet years, that by the time the principal called her name, she had not been thinking about her husband at all. She had been thinking about her daughter. About the look on Zara's face when she walked across that stage. About what it means to show a young woman, not tell her but show her, that dignity is not something other people can remove from you. That what you build in the dark still stands in the light. That silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is just a woman working. Zara fell asleep on the sofa before 10 o'clock. Lara covered her with a light blanket, turned off the television, and sat for a moment in the quiet. Outside, Lagos hummed on. Inside, everything was still. Lara picked up her phone, checked 3 messages from her executive team, replied to 2, and set the 3rd aside for morning. Then she put the phone down, looked at her sleeping daughter, and felt something settle deep in her chest. Not victory. Not relief. Just peace. The kind that does not come from winning against someone else. The kind that only comes from never having stopped being yourself. Through the years of being unseen, through the mornings of working alone, through the afternoon she picked up her bag and walked to the back row without a single word. She had always known who she was. She had simply been waiting for the right moment to let the room find out. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, Where are you watching from?